billionaires list for the first time today. Her net worth set at $1 billion. Forbes reports that Kardashian's worth rose from $780 million last October to its current status due to her KKW beauty and skins brands, cash from her reality TV and endorsement deals, as well as other investments. Last year, Kim sold 20% of her beauty brand Coty for $200 million, and her remaining stake in the company is worth about $500 million.
Welcome to the show. My name is Charlton with Big C. This is Charlton and Big C Sports. Coming to you worldwide on the Big C Sports Network, on the #1 network in the United States of America. And Big C Sports has been voted the #1 sports show in the universe, according to Big C. In them good old boys down south, I want to say bienvenidos to all of our listeners in Latin America, also across the pond in London, England, as well as Paris, France. Of course, you good old boys in Canada and Africa, the Big C tribe. But there's no one we love more than the good old boys down south, in the land of the free and the home of the brave on a beautiful April the 6th, 2021. Cuando Deportes, bonjour, Big C. How's it going for you good old boys down south?
Well, Charlton, it's hot as heck down here in the south, but I hear it's raining up in the Pacific Northwest. You know, I witnessed something last night that reminded me something of being a child, Charlton, when your parents were always bigger, stronger, faster, and taller than you. And the butt whipping that they passed out last night down in Indianapolis, I remember getting butt whippings like that as a child. And, you know, the tears would be falling in the rain. I guess that's what they're calling it up there in the Pacific Northwest.
Yeah.
But once again, I want to thank our frontline healthcare workers, our nurses, doctors, and first responders. They'll take care of those bruises that you have.
They'll take care of all the bruises. I want to say today's show is sponsored by your Northern California Cadillac dealers, home of the all-new Cadillac Escalade, the standard of the world. And when you go by and test drive yours, tell them Charlton and Big C sent you, as well as a fleet of Cadillac cars. Also, all around the world, say Google or Alexa, play Big C Sports Podcast. You will hear from our sponsors. You will hear welcome to the show. I will introduce Big C as the Mystic, and he'll do his thing from 3,000 miles away. And I really do appreciate the way things are growing with Big C Sports. You can follow Big C Sports on Spotify. You can follow Big C Sports on Xfinity, Comcast TV, Apple TV, Roku TV, Amazon Fire TV, and a lot of smart TVs all over the universe. But you better have a smart TV, or you'll be sitting there looking at a still picture. Man, I love pausing, Big C. I love pausing, but I will never pause on our Veterans Crisis Hotline. They really are experienced helping veterans and their loved ones get help. Big C, why should everybody care?
Well, Charlton, as we think about many adults struggling today in America, Charlton, we lose over 24 veterans a day to suicide through their various struggles that they've accumulated since their time in service, Charlton. And as a country, we need to be very aware of these struggles that they go through as part of our society. We give out the National Suicide Prevention Hotline number, Charlton, but this is a pandemic that has been going on for decades amongst our veterans.
Yep.
Over 24 committing suicide. We have a COVID-19 vaccine, Charlton, but our country does not think enough about our veterans to find even more desperate ways to help them out, Charlton, because there has to be a remedy for that. When we think about the number of Americans that we lose to suicide, the National Suicide Prevention Hotline number is there to help. But we need more Americans to help in giving out that service.
Yeah, I love doing our part. I really do. It's so important that we give it out, and that's why I love doing it every show. 800-273-8255. That's 800-273-8255. Or you can text 838-255. That's 838-255. If you're online, simply go to veteranscrisisline.net. That's veteranscrisisline.net, and you can hopefully get some help for our veterans and their loved ones. Also very happy to be affiliated with Valley, home with weekly TV on Dish TV, Direct TV, AT&T Uverse, TV 53, home of the San Francisco Giants, and the Say Hey Kid, as well as the Home Run King Barry Bonds. When you reach out to them, just tell them Big C sent you. Our goal is simple: recruit 10,000 real estate agents and brokers all over this great country, helping them put people back to work. Just like McDonald's does it, car dealerships do it, sports teams do it. Watch TV and real estate work for you. 800-772-8624. If you're looking for opportunities in real estate, go to bigcsports.pacwm.com. Most of our loans are underwritten by Rocket Mortgage, the #1 lender in the country on the wholesale side. Really appreciate that. I want to say thank you to Xfinity Comcast TV and Comcast Spotlight for presenting Big C Sports to the universe. Just like God said, let there be light. Open your cell phones and say, play Big C Sports Podcast. You will see all of our apps pop up, and I really do appreciate the way things have grown with Big C Sports. You know, I'm telling you, there's something about one shining moment, and I want to congratulate, number one, the women's Stanford Cardinals with their victory over the Arizona Wildcats to win the March Madness, the NCAA championship for the Stanford Cardinals. But last night, the Baylor Bears were the underdog, Big C, but it was kind of a play on words. How could a bear be an underdog to a dog, Big C, your thoughts?
Well, Charles, only people out on the West Coast thought that they were underdogs. I mean, you can't make a diamond without applying pressure.
Yeah.
And that's what the Baylor Bears did last night. I mean, that sphincter on those Bulldogs got real tight when that bear started chasing them.
Yeah, when that bear started chasing them. And I would tell you that I'm one of the guys that I was saying Gonzaga from start to finish. They got on the Sports Illustrated. They were talking about Mark Few, the first team to go 5 consecutive years, winning 30-plus games. They were a great team, and they're still a great team. I think they were worn out by Baylor and also worn out by UCLA the couple of days before. But no excuses. Only one team gets to cut down the nets, and I appreciate seeing that. You know, one time, sometimes people believe in signs, and sometimes signs are a good thing, and sometimes signs are a bad thing, they see. But this dog, my neighbor has a dog, and when people go for walks, it likes taking a squat on my lawn, Big C. So I thought, you know what, maybe that's a clue. The dog kept squatting on my lawn, and then he always rub his feet in the grass or his paws on the grass when he was done. So that made me even more convinced that the Gonzaga Bulldogs would win next season.
Well, Charlton, I mean, when you talk about, I'm going to use your line, bigger, stronger, faster, more athletic, more determined, more in everything. They brought it all to the court last night.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people talked about Gonzaga all throughout the season, but, 17 of their wins came against that weak West Coast Athletic Conference that they had, Charlton. Yes, they won some games out of conference, but when they got tested by the big boys consistently on a 6-game stretch, Charlton, you could see the pressure building up.
Yeah, I don't credit it that much about their conference being weak or strong, even though I don't think their conference is all that strong. But they've done, even in the tournament games, they had won, I think, 29 games by double digits. Their only close game was really all season long was Iowa. That was way back in December, I believe, and then UCLA that went to overtime. But every dog has his day. Even down goes Frazier. Down goes Frazier. I remember Ollie and Frazier with those fights over the years. Only one person can win, but you got to give Baylor some credit, and I give them credit. I don't think I'll ever think that a bulldog could beat a bear, Big Z. Maybe that's just a letter for physics, but at the same time, congratulations to Baylor. The Baylor Bears, they're not the number one commodity in Texas down there in Waco, even though they got a lot of money behind them. We know the University of Texas is the marquee program for everything that represents Texas. But at the same time, they're to do this for the first time in, 70 years, or 70-plus years, Big C. I was impressed by that, and I don't think they're going away anytime soon, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, you got to look at Baylor. Baylor is a forgotten program, Charlton. They've been in the tournament 16 of the last 19 years.
Yeah.
So it's been a very prominent program down in Texas. You also have to understand that Baylor is only the second university in the state of Texas to win an NCAA basketball title.
Yeah.
Texas Western was the first team to win, Charlton, with that all-black lineup back in the early 60s.
Yeah.
Which is now Texas Tech.
Yep,
so
Texas
when you
Tech.
think about what Baylor has done, rising up to the top of the college basketball crescendo, Charlton, they did it in a dominant fashion.
Yeah.
I mean, they went out and kicked butt last night. I mean, they left no doubt. It reminded me of the movie Remember the Titans starring Denzel Washington. When they went out on the field, Ed Harris told the defense, leave no doubt in their mind who we are when we walk off the field.
Yeah.
And that's what Baylor did to Gonzaga last night. You talk about opening up the game 9-0. At that point, I felt that the game was over because Gonzaga was shocked mentally at that point that they've never seen that happen to them all year long, that somebody goes on a 9-0 run. And then all of a sudden, you have a double-digit lead on Gonzaga, and you haven't even gotten to 20 points. And this team is like, okay, what do we muster now against these great athletes to be able to climb back out of this hole.
Yeah, well, they were down double digits to BYU earlier in the year, and they came back. So it's not like they hadn't seen it before. I just think they were spent from the game against UCLA. Many people said it was the greatest game they'd ever seen in the history of college basketball, if not number one, maybe number two. And they're not high school kids, but college kids. They were playing high school basketball a couple of years ago. But that doesn't mean that they're not a great program. Any team that goes wire to wire, and the only game you lose, it's like the New England Patriots. People can say, look at the Patriots. They were trying to go 18-0. They play in the weak AFC East, and at the same time they get to a Super Bowl, and they they lost to a New York Giants team that was not undefeated. And I don't think anyone in the universe would say, oh, that New England Patriots team, they were overrated. They're not a good team at all, Big C. Your thoughts?
I'm not saying that Gonzaga was overrated, but they were outmanned last night, Charlton. It was men against boys playing. You know, it was like, listen to boys to men. You know, when we come to the end of the road, that's where it was last night.
Yeah.
When they walked on the court, even before the tip-off, you could see the intimidation factor of the Baylor athletes. When you walk out there, you had a taller team. You had a more athletic team. They win the jump, and they never looked back, Charlton. This was a team that was destined. I mean, you can look at Gonzaga's record coming into this game undefeated. It's not like it's the first time that has ever happened.
Right.
Two other teams have done that also, come to the final championship game and lost to Charlton. But this was in convincing fashion. You have to admit, even yourself, Gonzaga was totally outmanned. You can't say that they were run down from the UCLA game because I believe Baylor played a game on the same night against the University of Houston, and they had to run up and down the floor also. This game came down to athleticism and desire, and it was a total mismatch.
Yeah, but then again, Baylor came into that game losing too, so it's not like they're the best team ever. They were the best team that night. That's just my opinion, but I wish them nothing but the best. And you think about college basketball, Baylor wanted the championship, and you could tell it. I still think they didn't have that same pressure. It's like the New England Patriots. I haven't found any one person that would say that the Giants could have beaten the Patriots again. I mean, that team was rolling. And no matter what people say, even professional athletes that get paid on top of the table, Big Z, sometimes they just don't have it. They get had by a team that had the multiple losses. That Giants team, they have to go on the road to get that Super Bowl. So they play with less pressure. Even grown men can break under pressure. But you got to give it to Baylor. Overwhelming Gonzaga. Ends the Bulldogs' perfect season to win the men's first basketball national title. It was Indiana 45 years ago out of the great state of Indiana in the great Bobby Knight. The only thing missing from this game that Bobby Knight would do, Bobby Knight would have thrown a chair at somebody. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, you know, I beg to differ when you talk about the pressure, because when you look at these young men on the college field, Charlton, they know that they will never play together again. When you got seniors on the roster, you have people opting out early for the NBA draft. They know this is their one and only chance to be a group of guys that they have grown with to win a national championship. And you're not going to be able to run through that field in back-to-back years. And so I say the pressure was equal on both teams. It was just the better team that took advantage of it last night.
I remember the 1978, there was a bowl game. Chris All started. UMass came out and beat Nevada. Nevada was ranked number one in the country, also from the West Coast. They were undefeated, and the only loss they had was to a UMass team that I think was 7-4 coming in, and there was a lot of pressure trying to be number one. It happened to UNLV also when they lost that game to Duke back in the day. But college men don't react the same way all the time, but you got to give Baylor credit. But I'm just saying you can't take anything away from what Gonzaga's done over the years. Baylor did start, as you mentioned, that game on a 9-0 run and never looked back, raining three-pointers on Gonzaga. And they had a smothering defense on the Bulldogs, Big C. I think they did it mostly when it counted. I know the Bulldogs tried to change up what kind of defense they were trying, man, which didn't work against the faster team. But the Bears dominated and never trailed against an undefeated Gonzaga squad, aiming to complete the first perfect season since 1976. And they did hit a buzzer beater to get the win in a few questionable calls. But there were a lot of questionable calls. A lot of people maybe thought on the West Coast, especially up in the great Northwest, that they were playing football, Biscuit. Your thoughts?
Well, I mean, when you look at the athleticism of Baylor last night, it was a total mismatch. When you think about a team that has three centers, they don't worry about somebody getting in foul trouble. They just go next man up. They came out in a three-guard rotation to start the game, which put maximum pressure on the Gonzaga Bulldogs, Charlton. And that pick-and-roll offense that Baylor ran so well last night. I mean, they slowed down the game late in the second half. Otherwise, they would have put up over 100 points on Gonzaga.
Yeah, well, there's always ifs, ands, or buts. I think Baylor played the best game they could have ever played. In fact, they looked better in that game than they looked in the two games that lost coming into the season. So just like the teams that beat Baylor, they can say, oh, that team's overrated, we beat them. It's all on that given night, but you got to give the Baylor Bears some credit. Obviously, you could tell they lift weights, Big C. Mark Few didn't have a lot of answers for Jarrett Butler, and it was Maceo Teague, Adam Flagler, Big C, Davion Mitchell, who combined to finish with 69 points and a variety of dazzling highlights. There was a commentator that was talking to Mark Few when the game was canceled. It was supposed to be, I think, in Indiana, and I think it was earlier in the year when COVID showed up and they canceled the Baylor and the Gonzaga game. And Mark Few was asked a question by an announcer, and he said, what do you think would have been an issue with playing Baylor? And he just said what we saw in the game. He said their tempo and their size. It was tempo and size. But a lot of people said tempo and size when you're looking at programs like Michigan and Alabama. They had Illinois, they had tempo and size. But all of those programs, the SEC champion Alabama, the Big Ten champion in Michigan, and also look at Illinois, they had the same tempo and size, but they were home watching the game too, Big C. Your thoughts?
They didn't have the athleticism that Baylor had. Baylor had the most athletic team in the entire tournament, regardless of other teams' ranking. They were a number one seed based on what they did. And you have to look at Baylor's two losses during the regular season. They came off an extensive COVID break. Their first loss came after a 16-day span that they went without playing because of COVID protocol. And so they were out of rhythm because they could not practice. And when they finally got an opportunity to play a game, they had to go in there cold, basically like the NFL starting its season this year without any preseason. So when you look at those factors in Baylor's loss, but after they got over those losses, Charlton, they were as dominant as any team in college basketball. And when you look at the competition that they played against several teams that were in the top four seeding in the tournament during the regular season. So they were dominant during the regular season, beating those teams that had high seeds in the NCAA tournament. Yeah,
it's all about matchups, though, because I look at Oklahoma State. I believe they won the championship down in the Big 12 Big C. They were number one seed, and they got had by Oregon State, which was a bottom dweller in the Pac-12. So it's about matchups and how you match up against the teams you're facing. At the same time, you can't take anything away from Baylor. You think about Butler, dropped in 22 points and drained 4 3-pointers, won the Final Four Most Outstanding Player Award. He showed it all over the court last night. Gonzaga shot 51% from the field, but could not overcome his turnovers. They had 14 turnovers, Baylor's second chance opportunities. They had 16 offensive rebounds, 16 second chance points, and the Bears made 44% of their three-pointers, and it also won every individual matchup, and that's why Mark Few went into playing zone when he started man-to-man. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, that's the athleticism that forces you out of your game plan. You think about how good Baylor was. They forced Gonzaga to make the adjustments. Baylor didn't have to make the adjustments. It was Gonzaga making adjustments offensively and defensively, trying to stay with Baylor. They took them out of their rhythm their entire game.
Yeah, they turned up the pressure. I still think they were fresher without having to play an overtime game, and that's just the college kids doing that thing, but taking nothing away from Baylor. But also, Baylor was just better than Gonzaga that night. Just like Ollie and Frazier fought 3 times. Ollie won twice, Frazier won once. It's a matter of the Giants and the Patriots played in the Super Bowl 2 times. And the Patriots decide next time the Giants go to the Super Bowl, they'd rather lose in the AFC Championship game. But Baylor was better. Most impressive runs in the NCAA tournament history for the Bulldogs, becoming the 5th team since 1976 that entered the tourney with an undefeated record but failed to win the title. Would you believe that number 1 versus 2, I think it's happened several times, and the number 2 seed has never lost, irrespective of them being undefeated or not. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, I mean, this is what you come to play. The pressure's on number 1. You got to defend what the media has made you. Not what on the court has made you, it's what the media has made you. And that's how Baylor looked at this game last night and coming into it. The media came and named Gonzaga number 1, okay? We feel that we're number 1. If not for COVID, we may be undefeated also, but when they had to take that 16-day lapse at one time and lost coming right out of that, Charlton, it wasn't good for the program. But, down the stretch, when you look in the tournament and see who dominated their opponents the most, that was Baylor throughout the tournament. They had the more convincing victory. than Gonzaga did.
Yeah, people may say that again, but Gonzaga beat a team.
That's what the numbers say. What people say that was the numbers.
Well,
when you look at the point differential, Baylor had a better point differential in the tournament than what Gonzaga did. That's not people, that's the players saying that.
But no, you're saying it's about matchups. Look at what Gonzaga did. You can try to knock them all you want to. They lost one.
I'm not knocking them. I'm praising them for getting to the championship game. I'm just saying that they came up against a better team when they had a head-to-head matchup that did not occur earlier in the season. And we don't know what the outcome would have been in that game because it wasn't played. But last night, you yourself have to say that Baylor was the best team in college basketball.
Yeah, they were the best team on the court last night, but a lot of people said that Alabama was better than UCLA. They lost by 10 points. People said Michigan was better than UCLA. They lost I guess by less than a basket. They said Kansas was better than USC. They lost. But a lot of people said Illinois would be the team that won the national championship.
There were 67 teams that lost the game in the tournament. Think about that. 67 teams lost the game in the tournament. We're talking about the championship game last night. Baylor Bears were the best team in college basketball last night, which in the crescendo for the championship game, at the end of the day, that's all that matters.
Yeah, it depends on the opinion of the person, though. There's a lot of people that felt, starting out, and even you were one of them, were saying that Illinois was going to cut down the nets. They were watching the game on TV for the last 3 weeks, Big C. So it's about matchups. Illinois got had. Some people thought Loyola Chicago would cut down the nets. Some people thought Ohio State would cut down the nets. It's about matchups on that night, and Baylor was the better team that night, and maybe they win. If they play it 10 times, maybe they win 6 out of those 10 times.
I give them 8 at least.
Maybe.
They're dominant athletes. I mean, when we look at sports, and it's all about matchups, especially in basketball. And you rave about those West Coast teams when they're winning, and you say, okay, they got players that are hurt, so they have a mismatch problem. We're talking about teams that are going out there healthy. And when you look at the physicality that Baylor brings to the floor, you can't say that Gonzaga matched up with them physically last night.
No, but when you look at Pac-12 competition, I think they had 5 teams in the tournament, and they were 12-5 in the tournament. I mean, they did a much better record.
In the championship game last night, what conferences were playing and what was the matchup? We can talk about all those 67 teams that lost. Prior to, that did not win the championship. 67 teams did not win the championship of the 68. Regardless of what their record was as a conference, it came down to Baylor, which was undefeated in the tournament, and they have the NCAA championship of 2021.
Yeah, but my point was, if you look at the SEC, which had a lot of teams ranked in the tournament, coming into the tournament, same as the Big Ten, and they were all knocked out. In fact, those conferences were knocked out by the Pac-12. And the Pac-12 is winless against the Gonzaga Bulldogs over the last 12 games. That's going back several years. But if you want to knock any program for saying they don't play the best competition, they beat a team that knocked out the SEC champion and the Big Ten champion. So it is about matchups. But conferences-wise, I think the Pac-12 had one of the stronger conferences. And on the court, they earned it. If you leave it to the media, no, they don't get the same respect. But it was an end to a remarkable season for Gonzaga. And you think about it from the tip to the final whistle, this game was Baylor's. Baylor led the night by a balanced scoring. Butler 22 points, Teague 19. Mitchell dropped in 15. Flackley had 13 points. They had a dominant performance in all facets. In the aftermath, Big C, and people can like who they want to like. It was just about Gonzaga and Baylor last night. But the toughest road getting to March Madness, I would say it was Gonzaga. The Bulldogs had the toughest road because they beat the teams that knocked out championship teams from other conferences that get a lot of media hype. And so that matters a lot, too. When you look at what happened last night, likely going to center on Gonzaga missing its shot at history. I don't know if they'll ever get back to that part. Even UNLV never got back when they were undefeated and got knocked out by Duke, but they were trying to repeat as champions. Gonzaga's never gotten to that point, Big C. But it's going to be a stain, I think, on just the people that want to see an undefeated season. An unblemished season's hard to come by. And in Baylor at the same time, they were very, very sound. They were prepared, and they were the underdog. And again, it's hard to see a Bear being an underdog to a Bulldog. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, I didn't think of them as being an underdog. You got to realize this is Mark Cubic's second bite at the apple. This is his second run at a national championship.
In 4 years.
He lost in 2017, Charleston, when he came in favorite. And now he's lost in 2021 where he came in favorite. What happens when you get to the national championship game? It comes down to depth and athleticism.
Yeah.
And people can say, well, somebody played overtime and all of that. Everybody goes under the same criteria throughout the season and throughout the tournament. And you got to think about Baylor. I know you talked about our athletes suffering from COVID-19.
Yeah.
As I said, this was a 16-game stretch during the season, a 16-day stretch during the season, where they were affected by COVID-19.
Yeah.
It didn't show effects last night.
Yeah.
They were bigger, faster, stronger, more determined, and all they did was kick butt.
Yeah, they won the game, and they did a good job in convincing fashion. Suggs eventually returned and finished with a team-high 22 points. And 15 coming after halftime. Kispert, in Associated Press, first-team All-American, and I don't see how. I'm not knocking the young man, but when I saw him in that game last night, and even in the game against UCLA, and even in the game against the USC program, I didn't see him being worthy of being on a first-team All-American list. That's just my opinion, and I think people saw that last night. So that might be media bias, Big C. It didn't get a lot of clean looks for him, finished with just 12 points and 2 3-pointers. Second teamer, Drew Timme, which is very much media hype. It's just my opinion. He's a good player, but I don't see him being an NBA star, and I don't really see him being an imposing first team or second team All-American at his position. I think Gonzaga does a great job of spreading the ball around, and when you stretch out the defense, you have that big guy down inside, but he just showed that he doesn't have the athleticism. Even being a tall guy, he can't impose or intimidate another big guy down in the paint. That's just what I saw, but he had 12 shots, just 7 shots. And then also Gonzaga made 5 of 17 3-pointers, their lowest total in the 6 NCAA tournament games. And I say some of that had to do with playing a tough game against UCLA, an emotional game, but also there were more athletes in the Baylor uniforms. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, one minute you're singing Gonzaga's praises, and the next minute you're belittling their athletes, Charlton. I mean, when you think about All-American criteria, they met the All-American criteria to be selected as that by the media during the season. That was not media bias. That was based on their performance. When I looked at the kid from Gonzaga, he reminded me a lot of Dan Marley, who used to play with the Phoenix Suns.
Yeah.
A lot of the similar characteristics physically. But, you got to realize how great those athletes are at Baylor, that they brought everybody down to earth. When you go to a team that is full of dominant athletes, it's hard for athletes to stand out because everybody's so equal versus when you look at another university, Charlton, and they have 1 or 2 players that stand head and shoulders above everybody else. When you look at that Baylor lineup last night, they had 4 players scoring in double digits.
Yeah.
There's several players right there. They had one kid, Vole, with double-digit rebounds, and he wasn't even a starter.
Yeah.
But he caught everything that came off the rim. I mean, it gave Gonzaga no chance. It's about heart and desire when you come to college athletics. Some kids just can't be there for the biggest moments. But when you saw the kids from Baylor's last night, Charlton, when we think about a diamond in the rough, diamonds come from pressure. And when there's a lot of pressure applied, Charlton, you can create a diamond. And all of a sudden, Gonzaga had all that pressure put on them, Charlton, that they had not had all year long, and that diamond was formed, and all of a sudden Baylor walked off with it.
Yeah, I think a lot of people could say the same thing about New England trying to go undefeated and losing to the Giants.
College basketball, we're not talking about million-dollar players. We're talking about young kids out there on the court that you resonated at the start of the program. You can't compare professional athletes to collegiate athletes.
That's not true. They both got to perform, no matter whether high school or college, junior college, professional. They all got to perform. And Baylor outperformed last night. I do think Gonzaga was a little bit exhausted and emotionally spent from what many people call the greatest basketball game they've ever seen. And the turnaround after an overtime game and having one day off and to have a one shiny moment, I think that took its toll. And I think a lot of the broadcasters feel the same. But that's not taking anything away from Baylor. But as far as saying their players are All-American, if you think that their team, a great team. But individually, if you think that they had more All-Americans on the court last night than what you've seen of the other 64 teams in the tournament, that's just your opinion. But Baylor did end the 2020-21 season as the best team in America and the champion. They turned off the lights of the great Teddy Pendergrass saying about Big C and earned that victory over a team that had not lost all season. Gonzaga appeared to be, of the one game, a great juggernaut, Big C. Congrats to the Baylor Bears. on their national championship. I think they'll be back. I know Mark Few will be back also with Gonzaga, but that's what it is. It's about the thrill of victory and the agony of defeat. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, there was a whole lot of thrill going on in Waco, Texas last night, Charlton. It did a little B.B. King. The thrill is gone.
The thrill is gone. It's all fair in love and war. Congratulations to both programs, and really congratulations to all of college basketball from the men and the women's side. I believe Stafford had been away from home, I think about 80 games, or 80 days actually, because they had a COVID situation up in Santa Clara County, and they were not allowed to return to their home stadium, Big C, their home, even on campus, they were not allowed to return to that. So I appreciate what Stafford did on the women's side and having an all Pac-12 championship for the women's side, and then the West Coast Conference. And University of San Francisco Dons, the last program out of the West Coast Conference, Big C, back in the days of Casey Jones and Bill Russell to win a championship for the West Coast Conference. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, that was a long time ago, and that's when they only had 16 teams in the tournament.
Yeah, it's a long time ago, but it's all fair in love and war. I wish everybody nothing but the best. We're going to take what's called the Big C pause, also known as the Big C timeout. And when we come back, we're going to talk a little bit more about sports. And also some governor down in Texas is saying he doesn't want to support Major League Baseball. They have two teams in the state of Texas. In the words of the great Arnold Schwarzenegger, we'll be back. All right, we are back from the Big C pause, also known as the Big C timeout. You can follow Big C Sports 24 hours a day, 7 days a week on the #1 podcast network in the universe, iHeartRadio Podcast. You can follow Big C Sports on Apple Podcasts. You can follow Big C Sports on Google Podcasts. There's so many apps, and I really do appreciate the way things have grown with Big C Sports. I want to say thank you to Xfinity Comcast TV and Comcast Spotlight for presenting Big C Sports to the universe. Just like God said, let there be light. Open your cell phones and say play Big C Sports Podcast. You will see our apps pop up from anywhere in the world, and I really do appreciate the way things have grown with Big C Sports. So one shiny moment, they'll have another shiny moment coming up next season if all goes well. Big C, I want to talk a little bit about African American sports history. We're inspired every day by the accomplishments of these less celebrated African American athletes. Every team's Jackie Robinson, Big C, May 1st, 1950. Minnie Masono, Big C, is named the Cuban Comet. And the first African American athlete on the White Sox played his first game, making his first of 5 stints with Chicago in 17 Major League Baseball seasons. Nicknamed the Cuban Comet, and also Mr. White Sox, was a Cuban professional baseball player, Big C. He began his baseball career in the Negro Leagues in 1946 and became an all-star third baseman with the New York Cubans, Big C. He was signed by the Cleveland Indians of the Major League Baseball after the 1948 season, and that's when baseball's color line fell, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, a lot of people don't realize how many black athletes were around, Charlton. I mean, here's Minnie Minoso, who was a Cuban black.
Yeah.
But he had as hard a time getting into the major leagues as any American-born black, Charlton, and had to start his professional career in the Negro League. But once like many other African Americans, once he got an opportunity to play in the major league, Charlton, they were changing the face of history of the league.
Yeah, if you think about it, Big C, off the field, while Jackie Robinson was understated, he was more flamboyant, embracing his newfound fame and celebrity, driving a green Cadillac around in his new hometown while wearing bright-colored shirts with wide-brim hats with that Cuban influence. He went on to become an all-star left fielder with the Indians at that time, Chicago White Sox also, and the first black Cuban in major leagues and the first black player in the White Sox history. As a 1951 rookie, he was one of the first Latin Americans to play a Major League All-Star game, which the governor of Texas says he doesn't want to support anymore. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, you think about Minoso at that time being flamboyant, Charlton, and he was prime time before prime time.
Yeah.
Of modern time was out there, flashing around in big, lavish cars and bright colors, making himself known publicly who he was. He did not walk around with fear in America.
No, he sure not did. And, 1976, 12 years after his final year with the White Sox, he was at 50 years of age, Big C, or some people say 53 is believed at that time. He had 8 plate appearances for the 1976 team. and became allegedly the oldest player in baseball history to get a base hit, Big C. And that accomplishment was memorialized by a special Trops baseball card. Think about this, Big C, which a lot of the young fans like me knew about him, Big C. The Cuban Comet finished his career with batting .298. That's his average, and you know he was getting kind of the inside brush off, Big C. 1,963 hits. He had 186 home runs, and he had 1,023 RBIs, and you know he was also getting balls thrown at him too, Big C. Your thoughts?
I mean, Charlton, you think about the disrespect that black athletes had to deal with in the 50s. But when you think about Minoso in his career, being 53 years old and playing in the major league, still having the ability to do that. But one of the things that's lost in baseball history is that Bill Veeck signed Manny Minoso and signed him 5 different times to the White Sox.
Yeah.
Bill Veeck was a minority owner in baseball. When you look at Bill Veeck, if you look at the curly hair that he had, Charlton, during his lifetime, this man had African-American in his culture.
Well, all life came from Africa, Big C, just about how many generations ago, but that's proven by Dr. Leakey and Gregor Mendo. But just the fact that a lot of these great things were done with a lot of pressure. Also, as a 7-time American League All-Star and a 3-time Gold Glove outfielder, Big C, he was elected to the Chicago Sports Hall of Fame in 1984 and the World Baseball Hall of Fame in 1990. In 2002, he was also inducted and enshrined for the Eternals, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, I think about the era that he played in. This guy played in 5 different eras, Charlton, in Major League Baseball. Think about that. 5 decades. People talk about Tom Brady playing until his 40s. Minoso played, until he was 53.
Yeah.
And played 5 decades of professional baseball. This shows you the power and dominance of black athletes in every era.
Yeah, in every era, Big C. And he also, when you think about it, a lot of what these young men have done, they did it in Jim Crow. Tom Brady never had to deal with Jim Crow. So is he the GOAT? He's not put him back in Jim Crow with different skin color and tell me how he performs on and off the field. It's just a fact, Big C. At the NFL, speaking of NFL, Big C, Black Ownership Group 6 to break the black color barrier in the NFL owner circle, Big C, an African-American sports group in the city of Oakland, California, where our vice president was born, the city of Oakland, California. I love the city of Oakland. My grandparents grew up, they were in Oakland a lot when I was a young boy, Big C, and wants to bring a football team back to the city and make history as the first black-owned NFL ownership group. In the group known as the African-American Sports and Entertainment Group, Big C, they want to become the first black-owned NFL ownership group, and it has its sights set on the Bay Area. There's no one playing in the Coliseum but the A's, and they feel like it's a Jackie Robinson moment, Big C. And I don't know if you agree with that coming from the South, but Raymond Ray Bobbitt, Big C, the creator of the group, he thinks about when African Americans break barriers, it opens up barriers for all people who have been marginalized, Big C. Your thoughts?
And you think about it, it's almost like a movement to keep blacks out of ownership of professional teams, Charlton, when you think about the number of ownership groups that have put together trying to gain, control of professional organizations, and they've always been met with resistance. This is the biggest stage of all professional sports, the NFL, Charlton. And if we're fortunate enough to get black ownership in the NFL, you think about that. You're going to have to bring 2 teams into the NFL. The league is going to have to expand to 34 teams, Charlton, which would be a momentous movement. And wouldn't it be great if both of those expansion teams were owned by African-American entities?
Yeah, well, with all this boycott and people trying to overthrow the vote, get Greg Abbott, governor of Texas, says he doesn't want to support sports. Maybe they can get the Houston Texans and the Dallas Cowboys to come out to California and play in Oakland, Big C. They got enough room for both of them, but you think about it, there's only 2 current minority NFL owners, Shad Khan, a Pakistani American, who owns the Jacksonville Jaguars, also Kim Bagula, who's an Asian American and co-owns the Buffalo Bills. So the first challenge, Big C, as you mentioned, for the group is to acquire the city of Oakland's share of the Oakland Coliseum. Alameda County sold its share of the stadium last year to the Oakland Athletics. They want to rebuild a new stadium down near Jack London Square, a Major League Baseball franchise, Big C. So 3 groups are front runners to acquire the city share of the stadium, the Athletics, and a third group headlined by former great Oakland A's pitcher, the great Dave Stewart, Big C, has submitted a $115 million bid to buy Oakland's share of the Coliseum site, with the goal of developing that and potentially building a new stadium there if the Howard Terminal Ballpark doesn't materialize. A black man who's also trying to break the ownership barrier would it be a good thing to do, Big C? Your thoughts?
Well, I mean, when you look at these groups, they're competing against each other in ways, but any way that blacks can get in to professional ownership, Charlton, is great. It's just unfortunate they have to pit against each other.
Yeah.
But like I said, if it happens, there has to be two teams brought into the NFL. You have to expand with two teams to keep the size equal, Charlton, which could potentially be two black ownerships in new NFL coming forward.
Not really. You have the governor of Texas said he won't support sports. Just bring him out to California. This is their proof in the Golden State, Big C.
He's lying. He sticks to the stadium and gets up into a private box.
He won't turn down their money when they want to run for office, but he said he won't support them. They want equality at the voting box with all fair and level war. So the group, if it wins its bid to purchase the city's portion of the stadium, plans to build a new stadium in order to attract an NFL team. However, that comes with a different obstacle according to NFL ownership rules. Only an individual can own a team. The Sacramento area, they were trying to get a new team in Major League Soccer, but one owner with all the money pulled out, so they crippled that at the same time. NFL's the same way. Every NFL team, they must have an owner who owns at least 30% stake in the team, and meaning the group would have to get an exemption from the league. They probably will fight that, Big C. However, this speaks to the bigger issues of the wealth inequality in the United States. And the Carolina Panthers was sold in 2019 for $2.3 billion, and now everybody's making billions. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, that's the biggest hurdle is always the finances, Charlton. You can put enough people together to gather that type of money, but you're going to have to make one person the lead in that project, Charlton, that you're going to have to provide them with at least 35% ownership of the team.
Yeah, it's always a difficult thing to do, and people want to always add. I mean, money is everything; it runs everything. If anything comes to fruition, it would be nice. At least they're trying. Some people say, "Oh, they don't want to own a team," but they're asking for maybe an exemption to try to figure out how to make it more fair. And speaking of the governor down in Texas, Mr. Abbott, Big C, he was upset. He was perturbed that people would question him, and he said, just stick to sports and play baseball to a lot of the people down in Texas. With Major League Baseball is moving in its 2021 All-Star festivities to Denver this summer, Big C. I don't know why they would choose Denver. They've had an All-Star game back there before. I would have thought if they want to honor the great Hank Aaron, why not do it in Milwaukee? He was in Milwaukee before he went to Atlanta. But you think about this. The Denver thing immediately came out to our minds. An all-star home game and a home run derby at Coors Field is going to be fun watching. But how does that honor the late Hank Aaron, Big C? Your thoughts?
Well, no, I mean, the move to Milwaukee would have been great, Charlton. He spent the first 12 years of his career playing with the Milwaukee Braves. Got on his all-star and home run record chase in that city, Charlton. So baseball missed the boat when they're talking about honoring Hank Aaron during this All-Star festivities, Charlton, that it should have gone to Milwaukee.
Yeah, because Coors Field, people want to see home runs for the All-Stars, like the three-point shootout in the NBA, Big C. But how many home runs will the winner hit is a lot of people ask that question. What's the longest home run we'll see in the mile-high air? And who are the two players who we absolutely have to see hitting bombs a mile above sea level at Coors Field Home Run Derby, and why? But again, they missed the boat. They struck out when it came to really paying homage to the late Hank Aaron, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, they did strike out in that, Charlton, but baseball was forced to make a move. Rod Manfred, to stand with the players and the fans, Charlton, as far as equality in America. When we think about baseball was the first professional league to really cross the color barrier in the modern era to allow black athletes in through all the atrocities that they had to live with outside the game, Charlton. And I think that Rob Manfred did the proper move by standing with the history of the black baseball players in the National League, Charlton, by not going back and stepping back in time dealing with the pressure.
Yeah, I mean, it's always, you can't please everybody. And again, Milwaukee would have been a great place, but we all understand that. Or even Jackie Robinson with the Dodgers, Big C, could have moved it to Brooklyn or Los Angeles. That's just an opinion, but you can't please everybody. For Major League Baseball, playing the 2021 All-Star Game in Georgia wasn't worth the hassle for baseball to have played the All-Star Game in Atlanta while also honoring the late Henry Aaron, Big C, Hammer, and Hank without any real significant denouncing of the new law that would have been, it's unnecessary, an unnecessary risk for a lot of people. And when you think about it, it would have exposed itself to an embarrassment of playing its midseason showcase in a state that sought once again to aggressively disenfranchise and suppress black votes. The problem is there's 47 states in all trying to do it. And many of those states also have Major League Baseball, Big C. It would have done so just months after its historic inclusion, and the statistics of Negro League players into the mainstream record books, which is a good thing, and it would have done so after stating its commitment to no longer be a passive observer in the nation's massive social upheaval. But Big C, they opened Pandora's box. Are they going to do this in every state that has Major League Baseball, Big C? Your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, there's 43 states actually trying to put laws on the books, Charlton, to obstruct voting access as we move forward in America. It comes down to Congress. Well, the Senate passing SR1, the voting rights bill, the John Lewis voting rights bill. If they pass all that, Charlton, then everything is viewed at that point.
Yeah.
But I mean, this is proper. You know, when you think about professional sports puts an economic burden on a lot of states, Charlton, when they decide to put down their foot. I know Mitch McConnell said, you know, that corporate CEOs should not get into politics. Yes, they should, because while you were taking money from them, you were okay with that. Now that they're saying that what you're doing is wrong, you don't want them to have any say-so.
Yeah.
The NBA did this first, Charlton, when they had the bathroom law in Carolina, and they moved the All-Star game out of Charlotte. So Rod Manfred is just following suit of what other commissioners have done. And I think that sports, because it is so big and it has such a big mouth in the world of politics and athletics, Charlton, that the platform that it represents, majority of Americans pay more attention to sports than what they do to politics.
Yeah.
And athletes can bring attention to what's wrong in America. This is not the first time. I mean, if we go to the black advocates from back in the 60s, Charlton, black professional athletes that became political advocates, something for what was being done wrong in America towards minorities. We're getting that again now in the 2020s, Charlton.
Yeah.
And athletes have to stay in the forefront if they want our society to change.
Yep.
If athletes stay quiet, there will never be a change in society because there's too much money that moves through athletics.
That's a very good point, especially Mitch McConnell saying that the sports owners should stay out of politics but don't stay out of his wallet, if that makes sense to you. It's all fair level war. But think about it, back to Georgia, basically. Had they stayed in Georgia, baseball commissioner Rob Manfred, I'm going to call him the great Rob Manfred, and his sport have always been remembered for the sport that rewarded Georgia's fiction, Big C, in the 2020 election. There's a good old boy said that when black people vote, they had to steal it. How could they get it? They must have stolen the vote, Big C. And his subsequent senatorial runoff, they said that was stolen. They say Stacey Abrams helped lead the theft, but they don't say that white people steal when they win elections, Big C, and that the deadly attack on the U.S. Capitol was justified. And that's something that Mitch McConnell, he won't tell the people to stay out of politics when they're trying to crack down on violence at the Capitol, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, as long as white people are doing improprieties, Charlton, it's acceptable. It's always been acceptable throughout American history. But when black people have become awoke and politically knowledgeable of what's going on in America, and they voiced their disconcern about what was in office and came out and voted, all of a sudden white people want to say, hey, you know, they don't have the right to vote for those people.
Yeah.
And we want to say that their votes were illegal, that they didn't know what they were doing. They stole it. You know, every time you put something on a black person in America, they either stole it or they were a threat.
Yeah.
That's how white society has looked at blacks ever since they've been in America, that they have been a threat to them. I mean, even in the Chauvin trial, they said this man, he was dead on the ground, but he was still a threat to the officers, Charlton. And so this is the myth that has always been put and labeled on black people in America, is that they are a threat. And even when it came to voting, they are a threat to the white way of life because they want to have equality in America. Like I say often, white people need to be happy that all we want is equality and not revenge for what they have done to us.
Yeah, and I want to stand up for the decent white brethren, like Dr. King said, just people by the content of their character, not the color of their skin. It's the bad character of white folks, not the good ones, and people should know the difference. At the same time, Big C, jumping to the NFL, I wonder if they'll have the same kind of issues, because the Atlanta Falcons, last I checked, they played down there in the same state and city of Atlanta, Georgia, Big C. But the NFL is the first time in the common draft era since 1967 that 5 quarterbacks selected by the top 3 overall picks Big C, they're going to be playing for different teams next season. Just like Governor Abbott of Texas. He's not going to get elected again down in Texas, Big C. He wouldn't even go to his home states in the baseball pitch out down in Arlington because he didn't want to get booed, but he wasn't to vote for him, as he says, stay out of politics. At the same time, you have the great Sam Darnold, and he's going from the Jets to the Panthers. I still think Teddy Bridgewater would be a better quarterback for Carolina Panthers, but hey, they got to do what they got to do with Matt Rule. Mitch Trubisky, he goes from the Bears. Big C, it's amazing. The Bears to the Bills, he's not going to see any starting time. Josh Allen's doing his thing, Big C. Jared Goff from the Rams to the Lions. I don't know if he's going to have better success with the Lions. He took the Rams to the Super Bowl. He's not going to take the Lions to the Super Bowl. The great Carson Wentz from the Eagles to the Colts. Can he even stay healthy? I don't think he's ever had a season where he's been healthy from start to finish, even at North Dakota State. And then Matthew Stafford from the Lions to the Rams. So the Rams take a quarterback that got him to the Super Bowl. They put him on a plane to Detroit, and they had a guy come from Detroit who never even won a playoff game, and they think it's going to make him a better team. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, Carson Wentz will have the most success of those 5 quarterbacks, Charlton, you named. He went into a team that's ready-made. When you think about the mobility that he will bring to that offense that Phillip Rivers could not provide last year, Charlton, Carson Wentz is a huge upgrade. You're going to see the Indianapolis Colts win a minimum of 11 games this upcoming season, if not 12.
Yeah, it's all fair in love and war. We'll just see if he can stay healthy, because he hasn't been healthy start to finish, even his last season at North Dakota State. But I wish everybody nothing but the best, Big C. At the same time, we're talking a lot about Georgia. They're the reason the Senate was flipped Democratic, Big C. And I think one of the best-dressed owners, they say the girls go crazy about a sharp-dressed man. I think they go crazy about a rich man who's sharply dressed, if that makes sense to you. Not every rich guy dresses well. But Atlanta Falcons owner, the great Arthur Blank, Big C, he was critical of a new law that imposes restrictions on voting in Georgia, saying Tuesday that the state should make voting easier, not harder, for every eligible citizen, Big C, and every voice and vote matters and should be heard throughout our democratic process in the great state of Georgia. Mr. Blank also said in a statement released by the team, the right to vote is simply sacred, that we should be working to make voting easier, not harder, for every eligible citizen. And if you ever get to throw out the first pitch for a baseball season in your home state where you're a governor, and if you can't get support at your home stadium, don't boycott them and tell them to just give you money instead for your political campaign. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, Arthur Blank is very salient of his surroundings, Charlton. When you live in Atlanta, you live in a population that is minority, that 53% of the population in the city you live in is African American. He well understands that, Charlton. When you think about his football team, the Atlanta Falcons, you think about their fan base. This is at least 60% African American.
Yeah.
You think about his soccer team, Atlanta United, Charlton. The fan base of that is at least 60% Hispanic. So he understands the opportunities that come from him making money from the minority part of the population, that he has to integrate himself into that and ingratiate himself with their plight, Charlton. That's what he's doing. And as I said earlier, when sports speak up, people have to listen because of the economic value of sports teams and the power that they wield. And when you put pressure on politicians, I know in Georgia they talked about Delta Airlines and Coca-Cola, which are headed in there. And in Dallas, they talked about Southwest Airlines, American Airlines, and Dell Computers. You're talking about the largest companies in those states speaking out against voter suppression because their customers have to deal with that, Charlton. And they're not wanting to lose their customers, and so they have to stand by their customers to stay in business versus dealing with some politician who's an elected official.
Yeah, some people like the way things were in Jim Crow, Big C, but I appreciate you have Rob Manfred, the baseball commissioner, and you have the owner for the Atlanta Falcons, Big C, Arthur Blank. They're not African-American men, but their hearts are good, and they're trying to do the right thing, and even they face pushback from people who look just like them at times, but it's all fair and level war. I want to take a little bit of time before we come to a close today. It's so hot in California. It's so hot, I could use some what they call white lightning. I guess that's a white lightning.
Let me give you this little bit of injection when you talk about Bob Manford and Arthur Blank. You're talking about two Jewish individuals, Charlton, of Jewish descent. Not you can classify them as you want as white Americans. No, they dealt with oppression throughout their history. When we think about World War II and the fight that their culture had to go through during that horrendous time, Charlton, and even the fight that they've had to go through in America, the Jewish Americans, Charlton, they dealt with racial empathy and epithets that African American people have had to deal with in their early culture.
Yeah, in fact, Jewish Americans helped start the NAACP in 1912, and for the most part, they've been through the same type of issues that people of color have gone through. That's why I really appreciate those men. They could be quiet, but they want to do the right thing, and it's always good to do the right thing. Speaking of the right thing, Big C, NHL, the Tampa Bay Lightning, I like Lightning, Big C, they've finally been knocked down a notch, and the Colorado Avalanche have claimed a throne they've rightfully earned for the dominant play over the past month. Get a load of this, Big C. The Avs are 13-0-2 in their last 15 games and outscored opponents 62-24 in that stretch, dominating possession and smothering opponents at a stunning rate. There's no question they're the best team in the league right now, according to right now, Big C, as long as that lightning strike is still striking for them. But here's the rest of the top 10 in the NHL, Big C. Number 1, the Avalanche, followed by the Lightning, and then you have the Hurricanes, Big C, the Golden Knights. You got the Panthers, Big C, the Maple Leafs. Number 7, the Islanders. Number 8, the Capitals. Number 9, the Wild. And then the Penguins. Penguins, I mean, they're so pretty, but they're pretty mean on ice too, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, I mean, you're sitting there and you're praising them, but think about how a week ago, Charlton, we were talking about the Buffalo Sabres, who were 0-18. They went on an 18-game winless streak, Charlton.
Yeah.
You know, the difference between being good and bad in hockey is night and day, and we see that in those two teams.
Yeah, we see that in those two teams. It's all fair and level. Where I want to just touch a little bit. We got hockey going on. We got baseball going on. There's a lot of things going on in the world of the sports universe, and I hope that everybody can get that libation to keep them cool because it's so hot. It's so hot in California. I know it's springtime, but it feels like it's summertime, and I know I saw snow at the home opener for the Detroit Tigers in Major League Baseball last week, Big C. So hopefully people can get some ice and cool down with the libations, but baseball should be able to help people get a nice libation and a hot dog. Tonight's games, you have the Minnesota Twins at Detroit, Big C. You have the Angels of California at the Washington Nationals. Houston's at also the Braves are at the Nationals. You have Houston at the Angels in Los Angeles. Big C, you have the Orioles. They're taking their show on the road to the New York Yankees. The Pirates are at the Cubs. I'm telling you, no, they're actually at the Reds, Big C. St. Louis is playing the Marlins down in Florida. It's so hot, they're going to enjoy being inside an air-conditioned room. And you have the New York Mets playing the Phillies. Tampa Bay's at Boston, Big C. Hopefully they'll get that game. Got in the way. Boston had some rainouts earlier in the week, Big C, last week. Milwaukee at Chicago, the Cubs. You have Toronto at Texas. Hopefully Abbott, I don't think they're going to have a full house this time. Arizona's at Colorado. The defending world champion Los Angeles Dodgers at the Oakland A's. San Francisco's at San Diego. And the Chicago White Sox at the Seattle Mariners for baseball, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, we're about 100 games away from anything meaning anything in baseball. I mean, the season just kicked off. You got players being hurt already. We're going to see how things work out in a few months.
Yeah, we'll see how it works out in a few months. I think Tatis is not going to have a season-ending surgery, so he's going to be, that's good news for the good old boy down with the Padres. Big C, I want to touch just a little dream. People always talk about March Madness, how great it was. Should we expand college football playoffs? For the first time in NCAA March Madness history, there were no teams that were east of the Mississippi River. If you look at college football, what would a college football playoff look like with only teams located west of the Mississippi River? So who would the Final Four teams be? Starting out with the most obvious choice. You look at Oklahoma, the Sooners have won the last 6 Big 12 titles. Big C, they've also reached the college football playoff 4 times. Number 2, Texas A&M. The Aggies did come pretty close to the playoffs in 2020. Granted, the argument for inclusion over Notre Dame was not a good one or a winning argument, but merely having an argument is a right step in the right direction for the Aggies. And then you look at the Oregon Ducks, Big C, and choosing the Ducks because Mario Cristobal is returning He's trying to recruit like an SEC type level to Eugene, Oregon, Big C. The rest of the conference is catching up, more of a passing conference, Big C. Then Iowa, number 4. You look at the committee. If they ever choose the nuclear option and puts in at number 5 team, and the most likely candidate would have been maybe Houston, which is in the Final Four of basketball, or Boise State. But Iowa's also been knocking on the door, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, I mean, I know you're an advocate for the expansion of college football playoffs, Charlton, and I think it's just so tough physically on the kids. You talked about Gonzaga playing in an overtime game, and maybe that took some of their legs away when they got to the finals, which, is questionable. But, you got to think about the brutalness of the college football game, Charlton, and making these players play for an extra month to win a championship, knowing only one team is going to do it. You got to risk injury. You got to risk missing class, Charlton. And is it worth it for the kids, or is it just about the fans?
It's probably, as what I would believe, if you want to opt out, just like people opted out of the COVID season, they can opt out. It's only for the people that want to go. But I think whenever you have more teams that have won their conference, you don't want to leave them out and say you didn't win your conference, you can't get in. If that would have been the case, the Baylor Bears would not have played for a national championship because they didn't win the Big 12 or the Big 12 conference. So if you get the chance to earn it on the court, that's always the best thing in Big C. Last story.
Well, they won the conference. They didn't win the tournament.
Yeah, they didn't.
But when we're talking about football, you got to look at the brutality of the game. Basketball, you play a minimum of 2 games a week during the regular season. Football, you have 1 game and you have a bye throughout the season. Think about forcing these kids that's not getting compensated financially to have to play 5 extra games, Charlton, to win a championship.
Yeah, that's why I say they can opt out. For the guys who think it's too tough, just opt out and watch it at home with the guys who want to play. As far as Baylor winning the Big 12 and losing the tournament champion is an automatic in. That's how Oregon State got in. I think you should let teams who win get in. They won the tournament. That's why they get in. But if they did it like football, they would have been on the outside looking out because they did not win their championship game, kind of like Alabama and Texas A&M and Florida down south. Last story, Big C, in the last minute. NBA basketball schedule tonight. Chicago is at Indiana. Indiana's still partying. Indianapolis still partying from last night, March Madness. New Orleans at Atlanta. The 76ers are at Boston. The LA Lakers at Toronto. Memphis is at Miami. Big C is going to be hot down in Miami. Detroit's at Denver. Denver's coming on strong. Milwaukee Bucks at Golden State. And you have the Portland Trailblazers at the LA Clippers. It should be a West Coast classic, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, you got to worry about the Lakers, Charlton. They've been on a slide like they're on a ski slope. So they might want to think about going up to Denver and cooling down a little bit.
Yeah, it's all fair level war. They got enough air conditioners in Los Angeles. They want to cool them down. They'll cool them down if that makes sense. It's all fair level war. Baylor, congratulations. You're national champions. Gonzaga, congratulations on a great season. Arizona, congratulations on a great season on the women's side. And Stafford, congratulations. You're national champions. Big C, back in the day, there's a man by the name of Drew Boudini Brown. He was known as Muhammad Ali's right-hand man, and he would always tell Ali, with all you've got to use, how can you lose? Rumble, young man, rumble, float like a butterfly, and sting like a bee. Big C, what are you looking forward to in the sports universe?
Well, Charlton, we had a team in college basketball last night from the southeast part of Texas win the collegiate national championship on the men's side. Just like in football, a team from the south and the collegiate side, men, wins football. And baseball most likely will be the same. I want to congratulate all those young men for their great performances on the court last night and on the field last season. Once again, I want to thank our frontline healthcare workers, our nurses, doctors, first responders. I want to thank them for the performance that they provide for American citizens every day.
You can perform every day. You can do it every day. But you got to rise and shine. You can rise and shine every day when you follow Big C Sports on the Big C Sports Network, on the #1 network in the United States of America, iHeartRadio podcast. You can follow Big C Sports on Apple Podcasts. You can follow Big C Sports on so many apps. As my mom always says, there's never, ever an excuse for racism or domestic violence. If you know any man, woman, or child going through that garbage, please pick up the phone and ask for help, because no man, woman, or child should ever have to go through that garbage on their own. And as we always tell you on every Big C Sports show, we thank you, we appreciate you, and we hope that you have a super fantastic day.